On the morning of Friday, June the 24th, if Britain votes to leave the EU, the most significant first reaction will come in financial markets and politics. Because a leave vote would create uncertainty, it's likely that sterling would fall and equities could suffer on fears of an economic growth slowdown. Market interest rates might rise to reflect the increased risk. To counter that, the Bank of England will do whatever it can to calm markets and keep the economy on track, offering unlimited liquidity to banks at cheap rates, for example, or swap lines to dollars and euros if banks are short of those currencies. Despite his protestations to the contrary, few believe that David Cameron could remain Prime Minister after a defeat on an issue of such national importance. The same is true for his Chancellor, George Osborne, who is unlikely to stay in his post to negotiate an exit from the EU, a strategy he has repeatedly called economically illiterate. A Brexit would therefore likely see both men's resignation and the start of a Conservative Party leadership campaign. Meanwhile, European leaders will declare their disappointment at the result. German Chancellor Angela Merkel will likely strike a measured tone, but other leaders may start sending stern messages about how tough they will make life for Britain as it negotiates its new relationship with the EU. The immediate concern in Brussels will be to calm markets and to show that the European project will survive without the UK. There is no legal requirement for the UK government to immediately trigger the Article 50 divorce clause in the EU treaty, so negotiations are unlikely to start immediately. For business, the morning after a leave vote will either be the moment to start putting contingency plans into action, or to start scrambling to make those plans, since many boards have adopted a wait-and-see approach. Trading conditions will not change immediately, but company bosses will want to start lobbying government hard for a business-friendly outcome to any divorce settlement with the EU. If, on the other hand, Britain votes to remain in the EU by a large margin, the picture will look very different. Sterling would likely rise, and David Cameron's position as Prime Minister would be secured. He'd be likely to try to heal the wounds in his divided party with a swift reconciliation reshuffle, bringing into his top team some of the big Tory beasts who tried to take Britain out of the EU. Michael Gove, Justice Secretary, could be made Deputy Prime Minister. Boris Johnson, although he has infuriated Cameron during the campaign, could get a cabinet job. But perhaps the poisoned chalice of an important but politically hazardous department like health. Most of big business, meanwhile, would heave a sigh of relief, whilst many smaller businesses and entrepreneurs would be bitterly disappointed. A smaller margin of victory would leave Cameron in a much more precarious position. He has promised to stand down as Prime Minister before 2020, but the clock would be ticking. And a smaller margin means the European question, which dogs British politics, may have only been temporarily resolved.
The European Union is an economic and political union.